Humanities chapter. So some reminders from last time. Your peer review / critiques are due on 3/3. So that's next Thursday at 11:59 p.m. So I have some questions still because, what's that?
This Thursday.
Yes, this Thursday. Is that not what I said?
Next Thursday.
Oh, well, just technically next Thursday. But yeah, it's like this Thursday, this week. Okay, thank you for the clarification. All right, so it's due this Thursday, not during your spring break. And so there's been a lot of questions about the bad interface for web courses. So I'm expecting at least one person to submit their extra credit on that, first come, first serve, right? So what you have to do to figure out what your 2 peer reviews are is click on your assignment for PD1, okay? And then on the right-hand side, it should say 2 peer reviews assigned and list 2 people's names, okay? So the question that I get is, well, since it's assigning me an individual, do I just evaluate that individual's work in the peer evaluation, or am I evaluating it at the group level? That's a good question. I want you to evaluate it at the group level, which is the template that I created, is to focus on the project from the group level, not just that individual person's contribution, okay? So when you click on the peer review, it should allow you to attach a file to upload it, because that's where you're going to upload the template so it actually goes to that team so they get their feedback. The other thing you should do is click on the rubric that's up on the top and fill out the point values. You don't have to put any comments in the rubric on web courses, okay? That should all go in your template that you're uploading as a file, okay? So that's for the peer review process, so your feedback goes directly to the group that you're reviewing, okay? If you don't do that, I said that that's 20 points of your grade, because otherwise I'm routing manually 163 times 2 peer reviews to all groups, okay? So I really need you to do that step. The second piece, however, for your full grade for your peer reviews or your critiques is to combine those 2 templates for those 2 groups into one document and submit as your individual assignment on the due date that's due, okay? So that's to be able to get it to me and the TAs to grade it. Okay, so any more questions about the whole peer review critique process? And I'll apologize that the interface for web courses does make it very clunky. Yes? What's that? So click on the PD1 assignment that your group already submitted, and then on the side of that assignment, it should have a list of 2 individuals' names that are your peer reviews.
I know it's regularly used to kind of references. So I'm going to try to incorporate
Some
a little
people,
more,
if you're on your home page,
you know,
have a
just
nice little
go
notification
to
on the right
website and
margin
get
that
first
says
image.
here are your 2 peer reviews, but as Crystal just showed me, not all people have that.
Yes, we can try to fix whatever.
And if you're still having a hard time finding it, come after class and let me see it, and we'll make sure that you can find where your peer reviews are, okay? Please make sure to use that word template. If all you do is submit the rubric based on web courses, you will not get full credit for your assignment, okay? All right, also your optional revision assignment. I've actually changed the date. I pushed it back 2 days because I want you to get all of this feedback first, and I checked with the 2 TAs who are grading your PD1, and because it's also their midterm exam time, they're really struggling trying to get your grades back in a timely manner. Because think of it this way, you had to write 1 project deliverable for your documentation and review 2 other groups. We have to grade about 29 or 30 different project documentations. And you had 6 weeks to write them. We have about 3 weeks to grade them. So we're trying to get those to you as soon as possible. But please bear with us because we want to give you good quality feedback. But that revision assignment, what you can do over spring break, should you choose, for that revision assignment is already take the feedback that you're getting from your other groups and start incorporating that feedback in order to improve your assignment. You'll also get feedback from me and the TAs to incorporate, but we'll get that to
responses, the individual critiques in one document. And each one of the groups is supposed to get one of those critiques. Are they basically just getting a critique for a group?
So before you combine them, you submit each individual one to the peer reviews for that group. And then you combine them and submit them to me. Okay?
So there's 3 different assignments basically that we're submitting to?
So under the peer review in PD1, you have the names of 2 people. So you have to click on each person you submit to each group. So that's 2 submissions, right? One for one group, one for the other. And then there's the final submission, which is your assignment submission to me. So yes, technically you're going to upload 3 times. Okay? All right. So that's where we are in the updates for the optional revision assignment. I have posted a revised course schedule, which I'll go over in class today, and then we'll talk about chapter 6. So some updates, those of you who saw, I posted an announcement saying that I miskeyed the exam key, and so I gave 2 people, I gave the whole class 2 points across the board for that question that I miskeyed. So for those of you who got the question wrong still, you got an extra 2 bonus points, okay? Basically, I was just kind of invalidating that question on the exam because I miskeyed it. So this is the actual distribution of grades on the exam. And one of the things I want you to think about if you were one of the people who are unhappy with your exam grade, because there are a lot of people who are okay with their exam grade, is that at the end of the day, I'm giving you up to 10 points of extra credit towards your exams. So if you apply that extra credit just to this exam, this is what the distribution of grades would be. It's much more positively skewed, right? So please take advantage of submitting your extra credit assignments because you're not banking that I'm going to give you a curve. You're going to focus on doing the best you can on your exams, doing your extra credit, and then coming to me for feedback if you want to understand how you can do better on your exams in the future. Okay? So this is the updated course schedule, which is posted for this week. Some of the things that I changed are here with the orange arrows. So next Thursday, I had you doing an in-class group work assignment for your prototypes. Because I'm not going to be here, I changed it to an individual assignment where I'm going to take attendance. Ramen will be here to take attendance. And then I have a student who took my class last semester coming in to give you a demo on how to do tips for creating your prototype and your video demo, okay? She's a really bright student, and she's actually bringing her business partner in with her to show you how to create a good prototype. So come to class. It will be part of your individual assignment grades as an attendance grade. And that's what will happen there. And also Tyler will be here, who is one of your TAs who can help answer questions. So the change was that it went from an in-class group assignment to an individual assignment because it doesn't make sense to grade it in groups if I'm just taking attendance. All right, the next thing I changed is that the optional revision assignment, I actually had it for the Tuesday right after you came back from spring break, but because grading your PD1s is taking a little longer than I would have liked it to, I moved it back 2 days to the Thursday after spring break, okay? So it'll give you a little bit more time after your spring break if you want to do that revision. The other thing I changed, which doesn't apply to anything we're doing right now, is I went ahead, I moved the peer evaluations up because I had them on your study day, and I realized that you guys don't appreciate when I make you do stuff on your study day. So I just moved it up 1 day. The peer evaluation itself isn't going to take a very long time. It's just a matter of being honest in your critique of your peers of your group, okay? So those are the only changes that are being made right now, which all of these should benefit you in the long run. Okay, any questions about the changes? Okay. So let me go over in detail kind of what your group project's going to look like for the rest of this semester. I'm in the process of putting together your prototyping and your video demo assignments, your official assignments that will be posted, but I'm going to give you a preview of it today. Over your spring break or before, I'm going to have these posted on web courses, so please take a look when they get posted, okay? So your initial prototypes are going to be due on March 24th. And the reason I say this is going to be 20% of your grade is because what I learned last semester is that your initial prototypes tend to not be very good. And that's okay because we're learning, right? So what I ended up deciding to do is your initial prototypes are going to be 20% of your prototype grade, and it will be graded once you submit your final prototype. So you're having to submit it on this date so I can have it locked in place of, okay, here's your initial prototype. And so we can actually do some evaluations of it to make it better. But then you're going to have the opportunity to redesign it and submit it for your final prototype. So the breakdown is going to be 20% of your prototype grade is going to be based on your initial prototype from the 24th, while 80% is going to be based on your improved prototype that's due closer to the end of the semester. Okay? The other things that we have on here is one of the reasons you have to turn in your initial prototype on the 24th is we're going to have in-class group assignments on the 29th and 31st to do some formal methods of expert evaluation, where I'm going to pair each group. I might actually create triads where I pair 3 groups together to do evaluations of one another's prototypes to find any issues or problems that could arise that can go into the final redesign. Okay? So if you don't have this initial prototype, you won't be able to do this in-class assignment. So that's why the initial prototype is important. As after doing the group evaluations, I'm going to have your videos demos due. So your video demo might be a version kind of, if your initial prototype is version 0, your video demo might be version 1, right? So you might have already incorporated some improvements into your demo based on some of the initial feedback you got from the expert evaluations. But it might also be your initial prototype. So depending on how quickly you can make changes, you're going to have a video demo. The video demo is just going to be basically doing a voiceover on your prototype and clicking through the task that you designed. Okay? And it's going to be at most 5 minutes, and you're going to submit it to me so that we can actually have 2 days in class where I'm running all of the videos back to back, so you can each see all of the demos that are being done across all the groups in this class. In some ways, this is kind of tedious because you're just going to be sitting in class watching the demos, but it's actually really good for you to see what your peers are doing, because it'll help you realize certain things that maybe you could do better, or it might help you realize that, you know, you need to step it up, or you can say, wow, you know, we're blowing this class out of the water, ours is the best prototype. It helps you to have that benchmark. Your expert evaluation write-ups from your in-class group project are going to be due on the 7th. So I'm actually going to have each of the groups do formal reports to give to the other groups, because what you do in class is going to be just the initial, like, okay, who's your target audience? What's your app about? Can you give me the PowerPoint file for your prototype? And so you might not get to the actual like critical analysis or evaluation. And so that's when you have your expert evaluations due. And then you have all the way from the 7th to the 21st to redesign. Okay? And the whole goal of this final prototype assignment is that I want to see a significant improvement from point 0 to version 2.0. Okay? And then finally, at the end of class, you're going to have a peer evaluation of your teammates and yourself. And that peer evaluation will be factored into your group project grade. So for those of you who've been coming to me saying, 3 of my team members aren't doing anything, or 1 of my team members hasn't even responded, this is where you're going to give me that information and provide adequate evidence as to that information. For instance, it will be easy to prove if, for the whole group project, a person was only listed on the collaboration section of the deliverable for 1 small piece of it. And then in the grading of that, you got like 0 points because they didn't do a good job. Okay? So So that's why we have the authors and editors and the list of group collaboration for each of the assignment deliverables, is to be able, when we do the peer evaluation, to say, okay, let's hold everybody accountable for the work that they did, okay? So some high-level details about your prototype and the demo overview is you want to model the completion of a primary user task, okay? So again, this is very user-centric. What would a user use your app for? What is like one of the main purposes of your app that adds value to the user? So what are some of the tasks that you should not model? A user login, an account creation page, because if somebody just looks at your video demo and all you're showing them is user login and an account creation, are they going to be like, yeah, you know, this app's going to be really useful and beneficial to me. I want to download this app.
Only if they're extremely paranoid.
Right. The security oriented ones, right? So think about what the core functionality of your app is, and it has to be a task that has, you know, some multiple parts, not just, okay, I open my app, I click a button, and I'm done. Something that has a little bit of oomph to it that you can model to say, if you give the user instructions in the beginning to say, I want you to do this, that they'd actually be able to complete it, and after doing that task, they can say, wow, you know, I really want to be able to use this app. Okay? Do you understand the level of task that I'm trying to get you to model? Any questions about that? Okay. The next thing is you're going to create screen mock-ups. So what you should be doing now is start doing some wireframes and just drawings of the workflow of your app. Okay, so you're going to start from the point of a person clicks on your app icon, opens up the app. Okay, what do they see when they first open the app? For the task that you're modeling, what would they click on to do the first step, the second step, the third step to complete? Okay, so you should be thinking about that piece now and drawing it on paper so you get this workflow down even before you get to the point of opening up Photoshop or whatever tool that you want to use to creating the graphical interfaces for screens. Okay. Next, you're going to take whatever screens that you create and put them in a PowerPoint file and then hook them up to one another so you can do a nice click through as if you're clicking on a mobile app. Okay. If you're doing some more advanced things like dragging and drop, you can use creative techniques such as animation to simulate some of that. To simulate entry of text, you just pretty much, when the user clicks on, so for instance, the username, you'll know to create a screen that looks like it's populating the username. So this is completely simulated functionality. You're not actually coding, okay? And then the final part is the video demo, is now that you have this completed app, is you're going to do a voiceover that takes no more than 5 minutes of explaining who, first do a nice introduction of your app. Think about what you wrote in your executive summary of your project documentation. So when we first start watching it, we get oriented to, okay, what the heck is this app? Instead of you automatically going into your task. But then spend the rest of the time doing the click-through of your prototype to get to the user to their end destination or goal, okay? So at the end of the day, after we all watch the video, we want to be thinking, wow, this app is really valuable to whoever the target audience is. It might not be valuable to me because I'm not part of that target audience, but the group communicated well enough to convince me that the target audience should use and benefit from this app. Okay? So in the next class, you're going to have some tips for how to create your prototypes and video demos. I'm also going to post some examples on web courses of prototypes that were created last semester. Realize that the prototypes might not be A quality because one, I can't share that FERPA And 2, I'm only posting the ones that the group said, yes, please share. Okay? So does anybody have any questions about their group project moving forward? Okay, great.
On the feedback we're gonna get over spring break, or when we do is one person, like project manager, resubmitting it if we so desire as a group? One person's resubmitting
That's
it?
a great question. So what I would suggest for your optional revision assignment is that you can either choose, I would suggest that you choose a new project manager, and that person can compile everything and then assign the task to different people to improve upon things. For instance, if the person did a bad job the first time, you probably wouldn't want to assign them the same part to revise to make better. You might want to assign somebody else to team with the person who wrote that section originally so that you have multiple people contributing to it to get it to a better quality place. The other thing that you need to know about your optional revision assignment is I have you list who did what revision. And what happens if I see that only 2 people in the team worked on the revision document?
So like 2 people got credit for the revision.
Right. So the people who did the work will be the people who could benefit in the improvement of the grade. If the rest of you decided, I'm going to Cancun for spring break, or even once I get back, I'm not really interested in helping with this grade's fine for me, my phone's ringing.
Ready?
I try to pick a non-stressful ringtone, because otherwise I just get stressed out because I don't like answering my phone. So for those of you who want to improve your grade, you'll have the opportunity to do that, but don't think that you can ride on the coattails of the other students in the class to get you a better grade for you. Okay? Any other questions? Okay.
We're gonna do the video.
Okay, so
And
now we're
then,
moving beyond
no,
the
so
last
supposed to
chapter
be
where we
reviews
talked
gonna
about command
participate.
languages. And
So if anyone
back in
would
the
like to
day,
jump in
when
and talk to
computers were
something,
run by command
I'm
languages,
gonna either put them on the
who were computer users?
Big company.
or the
Big companies, experts in the field. So would like your mom and dad or your cousins or like general population, would you have considered them like regular computer users at that point? No. So in some ways, human computer interaction and UX and interface design and usability widen the target audience of who computer users actually are. Okay? So, for instance, the same thing with the internet. When the internet was just a whole bunch of text before we had hypertext markup language and images, who used the internet? Mostly scientists. It's like ARPA, DARPA, and that, right?
Department of Defense.
Department of Defense, right? So it was only after we had more rich media that we're able to say that who uses the web now?
Cat videos.
Cat videos. That's a great answer. So we all can watch the internet, or be active members of the internet now. So some lingo that we use in the interface world, you've heard this one before, GUI stands for. So tells you how much of a nerd I am. I was listening to the radio, and somebody on the radio saying, can create GUI webs with a motion of his hand. And what do you think I was thinking?
Nonsense.
Well, I was just like, GUI webs. It's just like, web, like, what website isn't a graphical user interface these days? It just doesn't make any sense to me. What do you think the context was of this commercial? Yeah, I was talking about Spider-Man. All right. The other one that you're probably less likely to have seen is WIMP, which stands for Windows, Icon, Menu, and Pointer. So remember that WIMP is the Windows icon, menu, and pointer, and GUIs are what came after command languages, right? So this is an example of a what? It's a menu, right? Okay, so we're going to be talking about menus and other ways that users can put input into a graphical user interface without using command language. So where do you think we got the idea of being able to use menus to put input? Right. So when we're at a restaurant, we want to order something. What they provide us is a nice handy dandy little menu so we can make our selections. So that's essentially our input into the system, right? And then what's our output in a restaurant? That's us
Service.
inputting money into their system.
Service.
The service and the food is the output, because once you input your order, the hopeful output, if it's a user-friendly restaurant, is that you get your food, right? Cool. Okay. That's so much cooler of a ringer. So some of the things that we learned from this menu metaphor that are important are meaningful and distinct categories. What kind of categories are typical on a regular menu? Appetizers, entrees, dessert. And so what is it about these categories that is helpful to us? They're related to each other in a meaningful way. How are they usually ordered?
Like appetizers at the front.
Chronologically. Yeah, right? You think about it. So Rupa's right in one sense that the things that are more important tend to have stronger presence. Like for instance, all of those drink menus that come 3 pages before you get to any of the food because the drink is important, right? Actually, restaurants do that because the alcohol gives them higher profits than the food, right? But you're also right in that we have chronological order. For instance, you don't expect to see the appetizers on the last page, right? Or the dessert, the first thing on the menu, unless it's better than second or third place, right? Because that's all that's there. Sorry, it's something I see on Facebook. That's where I get all my news from. Okay, so there's a logical order, and then things that are less important go where? Towards the back. So what's less important? Desserts, that's chronological, because we all know desserts are important. Beverages and
Sides.
sides. I can never find the freaking sides on a menu. That's what my question is every time, because they ask me for my order and they're like, okay, what 2 sides would you like? My question every time is, okay, where are the sides? And you have to dig for them. Okay? The other thing we see is there's often some kind of hierarchical tree structure that helps us make decisions, right? Have you ever seen the dinner, $20 dinner for 2, where it says, okay, select one part of your entree, okay, then select the next part of your entree? So in some ways, menus help you make decisions. So when you're designing menus for applications, think of some of these goals of menu design. All right, so some of the benefits of menus. One is that they allow users to operate based on recognition instead of recall. Explain to me the example that I gave for this and why it's important. Clay.
The amount of information that's in use can get a lot larger with something recognition, because in that example, instead of giving you a menu, I just read to you every dish served at the restaurant. I continue to remember it all. I'd have to shrink the menu greatly to 7 items.
Right. So even if our waiter was so amazingly talented that he or she could read off the entire menu for us, by the time they get to the last option, we're just like, wait, what was the second thing that you said? Right?
That way, every time I
ask what dressings they have.
So it's scientifically proven that humans are capable of remembering about 5 chunks of information about well. And once it gets past that, we need some kind of mnemonic device in order to help us remember it. For instance, how do you remember a phone number?
So I write it down.
I stored it in my cell phone. I don't remember any phone numbers. Wendy?
It's split up into sections.
It's split into sections. So it's like the first 3 digits, and then 4 digits. How about social security numbers?
And break it up.
3, 2, 4.
3, 2, and 4. So see how we don't try to put more than 5 chunks of information together at once because it's harder for us to remember. But when it's something that requires more than 5 items, what do we do to try to remember it?
Associate.
What are your auxiliary verbs? Anybody know them?
What do you mean by auxiliary?
The helping verbs from like 7th grade grammar.
What?
Am, is, are, was, were, being, being, have, has, had, do, does, did, may, might, must, can, could, shall, should, will, would.
What?
Your auxiliary verbs.
We have no idea what you're saying to us right now.
Last semester, somebody actually knew them and said it before I did. So I remembered those because you put them together in a certain way, like shall, should, will, would. Right? How do we remember the alphabet?
The song.
The song, right? Can you say the alphabet backwards even though you know all 26 letters?
On certain days.
D, Y, X, W, B, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, K, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A? So we do things in a way that we have to enhance the recognition of items so we don't have to recall them because it's hard to do recall, right? Okay, next, selecting an item from a menu using a pointing device is usually easier than having to remember and type in a command. Is that true? So how many times have you been sitting behind somebody who's driving your computer and they're copying and pasting something and you know the Control-C, Control-V shortcut and they are painstakingly highlighting it, going to the edit, copy, and it makes you want to rip out your hair. That's me because I'm kind of impatient that way. So in some senses, if it's a novice user, they're more likely to use the menu system than a more advanced user who knows those shortcuts. So in some ways it's easier, not necessarily faster for the more routinized tasks such as copying and pasting. But for novices, that tends to be their preferred way of input, right? Because do the people who do the edit, copy, edit, paste, do they usually know that the Control-C and Control-V functions are there? Some people do. But not all people, right? So it makes sense that if somebody doesn't know that a way to do it exists, that they're going to use the way that's more obvious to them, right? Because does it say anywhere in the interface, use Control-C to copy?
It does actually copy in the menu.
Right, when you go to the menu. But when you're just like sitting there and you're like, how do I do that? Are you using recall or recognition? You're using recall, whereas when you browse the menu and try to find that choice, what are you using? Recognition. Okay. I know, but you already have to be in the menu. So if you're already in the menu, you might as well just use the point and click.
But since you did it once, now
You would think people would think that way. All right. So menus also give users immediate feedback when an option is chosen. Usually when you select an item on a menu, there's some kind of feedback to go to the next menu choice or decision tree, or it'll give you like a message saying like you successfully saved. There's some kind of feedback, or else it's usually that bad design where you're just like, okay, I don't see anything changing. Did I do what I just tried to do? Okay. And then they also help novice users make decisions about the task that they need to perform. Okay. So if you're in a brand new system and you have no idea how to use it or what kind of functionality it has, one of the first things that you do is you browse the menu of the options that are available to you. Oops. So some trade-offs in design. So the goal is to create a sensible, comprehensible, memorable, and conveniently organized, relevant menu to the user's task. Why is that hard? Wendy?
Because sometimes you can't have all of them in one menu.
Right, because a lot of software packages are built to where they're performing a lot more than one different task, right? And so if all of you are using the same exact system, maybe a quarter of you are trying to perform one task, another quarter another task, another quarter another task, and then the rest of you are doing like everything else completely different, right? So then you have to have a number of finite options in a menu to be able to model each of those users' goals. And that can become complex, and so more menu choices means more options for the user. Now what happens for Wendy when all she wants to do is this one simple task, and now all of those other tasks are modeled out there for the rest of you because you want to get your work done too?
Use the shortcut.
Well, we know Wendy's smart, so she of course uses a shortcut because she wouldn't want to deal with all that menu structure and complexity. But what happens is that it creates more cognitive overload, and I have to search more now for what I want to do because there's more options overall. Okay? So realize that complexity often leads to more options, but it also leads to higher error rates, increased time to complete a particular task sequence, and it also can cause confusion and dissatisfaction for users. For instance, if you add some menu items that are more complex to your menu structure, and the user doesn't even quite understand what that does, like for instance, Excel's in macro. Anybody ever written a macro in Excel? How many of you don't know what macros are? Okay, you're all like techie people, so I get that. But on the default menu for Excel, does it show how to do a macro anymore as one of the main options? Huh. It actually doesn't anymore because most users, like probably at least 80% of users, don't use that functionality, so they actually bury it. And you have to go on and customize your settings to turn macros back on so you have it as a menu option. Okay, so that's one of the things that trying to decrease complexity is doing is we customize menus to the most frequently used tasks. Okay, so the key here is to carefully consider task-related objects and actions. What do you want to be able to have the user do quickly and easily, opposed to the more complex functionality that you might want to hide in the interface a little bit more because maybe it's not as relevant to all users. Okay. So good design can balance these trade-offs well, but bad design can actually increase problems and user frustration. So this is a menu. This was one of my bad design examples of Walmart, and this is by the checkout, the return line, and I just had time to take a picture because the return line was like 15 people long, so I was ready to push that button. But what was the problem with it here? Yeah, it was a blue screen of death. So even if I gave my feedback, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be recorded in that menu.
I like how land courts all just wrap around one.
Oh gosh, it is.
Right. So like on one hand, Walmart is trying to get quick and simple feedback from users because users aren't going to go up to this terminal and then type in something and provide feedback, so they have this little shortcut key button. But then it broke down because like user technology, you could tell that, okay, well the system was broken. Clay.
Did they get that thing from like the baby aisle or the toddler aisle? Like what is that thing?
So there's a lot of emoticons that are being used now in design for instance, medical feedback. For instance, when there's a patient in a hospital, they now have a set of icons for you to choose where your pain level is. Have you seen those? Yeah. Like one is like I'm smiley and happy, and one's like I'm and then like the excruciating pain just gets more distressed. improvement.
I was gonna say, I have the same thing, but same exactly, but for one day.
Yeah, I actually saw that at the Orlando airport when I was traveling the other week.
Yeah, that's like the right button.
Right, it was by the trams to go from the terminal to
You're
the.
checking in your stuff.
Right, because they want to get quick feedback on, okay, well, how long are lines, how long is your wait, stuff like that.
Can you press the button multiple times?
That I do not know. All I know is that that's what I walked up to, and I was already pretty disgruntled at this point, so I took a picture. Alright, so there are different types of menus out there, and you want to think about these when you're designing a new interface. There are single menus that require users to choose between 2 or more items and may allow multiple selections. These are appropriate for simple subtasks or choosing, so you want to choose default wisely. And realize that the textbook takes a very liberal definition of what a menu is. Okay? So here, this dialog box is considered a single menu because it's what are you trying to accomplish? Getting user input about what?
Decision.
A decision. So you're asking a user if they want to put that folder into the recycle bin, yes or no. What should the default be here? Probably no, right? Because you don't want the destructive action to be the default one, right? And then, if you think about it, form fill-in, when you're actually trying to get a selection of input from a user, they're actually saying, oh, that's kind of like a single menu too. Because you're asking one question and trying to get feedback, okay? So think of menus as a way to get input from the user. So more broadly, these are 2 types of ways you can get input from the user. So it's defining menus a little differently than what we think about for menus. There are also different types of menus. There's pull down, pop up, and toolbar menus. Pull down menus are always available to the user by making selections on the top menu bar. What are some programs that have pull down menus? What's that? Snapchat? Mine. I don't know. Like, I know like the Microsoft Words and Excels of the world, they have a persistent top menu, right? And a lot of them have like you can click file or edit or those persistent menus or the pull down menus. There's also toolbars, iconic menus, and palettes. So these offer actions on the display that often float over the content area. Give me an example of that.
Like a table box, you're changing rows, width, whatever, on a Word document.
Okay, so like if you have like the form element document up or something, or how about the toolbar menu for Photoshop? How you can float those menus over your canvas. Okay. There's also pop-up menus, where these appear on the display in response to a check or a tap with a pointing device. Where do we see pop-up menus a lot? Sonia. That's more of a dialog box. Pop-up menus are kind of like you pull them. Go ahead.
Well, like on Microsoft Word, when you highlight a word, it'll give you the little quick font box and the.
Right. So, and then you right-click on the context menu. Okay.
No. Like you can actually just if you highlight it, it comes up.
It'll pop up.
Oh yeah. I hate when it does that sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it's,
Sometimes you don't want to do
I love
Right.
it.
Well, the other place you see these a lot are for the navigation for mobile apps, right? Where you don't have a persistent menu all the time because maybe they want to use that real estate for other things. And so it has just like one little place on the app where you click it and then the menu will pop up, right? So the difference between pop-up menus and pull-down menus are that the pop-up menus, you have to do something to get it, okay? Whereas the pull-down menus are more persistent and always there, okay? There's also menus that can be designed for using long lists. For instance, scrolling menus display the first portion of the menu and then additional menu items with an arrow that can lead to the other ones, okay? So if anybody's ever designed a form for like a survey in here before, when does it make sense to use like a multiple choice versus a scrolling menu or a drop down box? Clay?
If you have a lot of options, you want the drop down box, so you don't have to do screen realization displaying all of them at once all the time.
Right. So you'd use something like this to be able to put a long list, maybe like states or something, right? But if you only have like 5 or less options, it might make more sense to do like a multiple choice, okay? There's combo boxes, which combine the scrolling menu with the text entry field. How many of you like the fact that you can hit F and it almost always goes to Florida instead of having to scroll down to Florida? Unless it's like one of those politically correct ones that has like federated something of Micronesia. Okay. There's also fisheye menus, where it displays all of the menu items on the screen, but it only shows items near the cursor at full size, like this one. Where do you see menus like this a lot? Apple. Right. Okay, so ironically, we have a second slide, continue for long list. There's also sliders and sliders. When items with different ranges or numerical values, a slider like this can be provided to help you navigate the long list of items. The alpha slider uses multiple levels of granularity, such as A for all your contacts that start with an A. And then once you're in it, you can drill down into that. So you can have tens or hundreds of thousands of items in one menu. Where is something like this used very frequently? On your phone in your contacts, right? Because we all have so many contacts now that it's not feasible to just scroll with kind of a thumb, right? Okay, more menus for long lists. There's also two-dimensional menus for fast and max, where there's two dimensions which gives the user a good overview of his choices, and then once you choose one, it can drill down into the other. Usually you'll see things going on like the Z and the Y axis at the same time, and it's used when there's a large number of items to be integrated into the menu structure. So this is an example of what? This is my Roku. Anybody have a Roku? Or a smart TV, right? So the menu structure there is something like this, where it can give you kind of a primary menu here, and then as you go down these options, it gives you a bigger one here. The thing for these two-dimensional menus is what? Like, what is required for two-dimensional menus? Like,
Significant amount of screen real estate.
right, yeah, it takes up a lot of real estate. So it should be for those tasks that all you're doing is making a selection, and it doesn't make sense to be doing any other task at the same time. Like, you probably wouldn't have a menu like this for Microsoft Word because your main task is writing Word document. Whereas on my Roku, when I'm actually trying to select digital content to consume, that's my primary goal. Okay. Embedded menus and hot links. So generally, whenever a user is selecting options from a set of choices, the book conceptualizes this as a type of menu. Okay. So embedded menus are an alternative to explicit menus, which have an orderly enumeration of menu items. So it's natural to allow users reading about people, events, places, etc. to retrieve additional information by selecting the menu in context. And then these can be embedded options or text to graphics, or we can use hot links, which is inspired by web links. So this slide is like completely like confused all of you and me, right? Because it's from the book. And here's an example from the book. But what is this a glorified example of? It's like an e-catalog for an e-commerce website, right? Yeah, so from the book, again, like I said. So here you see the embedded menus is that it's actually embedded within the context of here are the items that the user can choose, like just like at the menu on Chili's. And then they have hot links to say, okay, this is my selection or this is my selection. So essentially, what embedded menus and hot links are things like where you have content that you want to select on even a site like Amazon or eBay, and you use these hot links to say, okay, this is what I want to put in my cart. This is what I want to choose. Okay, so I know that's kind of putting a twist on what we normally think in terms of menus, but if we're thinking of menus as a way to capture user input, it makes more sense. Okay, so there are different menu structures that you've probably already seen already. Linear menus tend to guide the user through complex decision-making process where one decision has to be made before another. Where do we see menus that are linear? When you're installing new software because you have to make a sequence of decisions. Or so anytime when you see something that's more like a wizard, right? So it's more structured input because it wants to ask you certain information before proceeding to the next information. There's also simultaneous menus where it presents multiple active menus at the same time and allows users to enter choices in any order. This is more common, like in Microsoft Word and other applications that we use, is that we can choose different menu items at different times. There's tree structure menus, which are more hierarchical. Designers can form categories of similar items to create the tree structure. Where do we see these types of hierarchical menus? Right, so even on websites we see them now because on websites they have different tree structures for different options.
I'll tell you a file manager.
File manager would have them. So anytime we kind of have those categories grouped just like appetizers, right? And then you have the tree structure under those. And then there's a cyclic and cyclic networks, which provide menu options from multiple locations, often in that embedded menu context, where it's kind of a network instead of a tree structure. Think about it. When you're on the web and you click on a hyperlink to go somewhere, is that a nice, simple tree structure? Or is it kind of this messy network where if you mapped this page linking to this page as nodes and then lines, what would it come out to look like?
Spaghetti bowl.
It would look more like a spaghetti bowl before you cook the pasta, probably, right? So it would look like that network where this page might relate to this page, but this page doesn't relate back to this page, it goes to this page, and this page goes over here. And they all have a menu, so they're all connected to each other, right? So that's the network structure. And that's mostly something you want to do for the web because people understand the idea of hot links and that it's not always going to be, okay, if I click to this page, it'll bring me back to this page. It's not nice and easy. But this is not a structure that you'd probably want to do for anything else. Yes, Dejan?
What difference in pace relative to?
That's a good question. I have to look that up because I just grouped them together. So one is probably where cyclic means that they probably go back to one another, and acyclic is probably where they just go one to other to the other to the other. But I'd have to look that up to make sure I'm not lying to you. Is the J in your name silent? It's a Y? Dayon. Okay. All right. That being just kind of going like this, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. All right. So again, these network structures aren't things that you'd probably want to use for like a mobile app or application on the desktop. But again, we see this very much on the web. And even on the web, we can sometimes get lost because we like go down the rabbit hole, right? Okay, so menu design guidelines. We like things that point, you are here, like menu maps. They can help users stay oriented to large menus, such as breadcrumbs on a web page. What do you think I mean by breadcrumbs? Yeah, so it's the whole metaphor of Hansel and Gretel, where they left a trail of breadcrumbs so they could get back home. What type of sites do you see breadcrumbs on very frequently?
One of the few things where courses is right.
Michael, what's that?
One of the few things where courses actually does right.
Right, so one of the things Web Courses does is it gives you a nice breadcrumb of where you've gone and you can click to go back up. But you often see breadcrumbs on those large e-commerce websites that sell multiple products, such as Best Buy or Amazon. I'm not sure if Amazon has it anymore, but I know like Best Buy and a lot of the tech companies do, to where you can drill down to, okay, Brendan.
I was gonna say, it's not a website for your files.
Right, your file system definitely has like a breadcrumb, because if you look up, it says, okay, I'm in C computer my documents, and then you can actually follow that breadcrumb up and down in the structure. Same thing with Best Buy. If I want to go look at mice, where do I go first? Probably electronics, and then computers, and then peripherals, and then, oh wait, I don't want, and then I click on like something, and they're like, wait, I need to go back one. You gotta go back. Okay, so those are like breadcrumbs and menu maps. Titles. How many times have you created a web page and you forgot to title it? And so your web page is called untitled, like a million other web pages online. Right? So how many times have you built an entire website and were lazy, and for each web page you just titled it the same thing? Don't lie, I do it. Like where you put like Pam's homepage on every page. I know your name, Avery. So we do that because we don't want to take the time to say Pam's webpage about me, right? But that's so much more intuitive for a user, especially when we do things like tabbed browsing, right? Because we might have 10 different tabs open and we want to be able to go to the right one by just looking at what the title says when we hover over it. Okay. Phrasing of menu items. One of the things that I tell all my students when they send me a resume to critique is that you should always use parallel structure. This is from my grammar nerd days. What is that? Anybody know what parallel structure is? Somebody other than Clay? What's your name? Troy.
Like all parts of the document or webpage should be like structured the same. They shouldn't have all different structures to be simple.
What do you mean by structure?
Like the way it's laid out. Like
So parallel structure isn't about layout as much as it is about
Sentence structure.
sentence structure. So for instance, when you put bullet points underneath, what's one of the jobs that one of you have? Okay, I'll use my own example. Assistant professor at the University of Central Florida. Taught a class of 163 students. Creating content for a diverse set of CSIT and CE undergrads. What's wrong with those 2 bullet points? Crystal. Right, so I didn't use parallel structure. Parallel structure would be saying taught, developed, created. And do you think we use parallel structure when we have menu options? We should, right? Because usually on a computer system we have 2 things. We have nouns and we have verbs, right? Which are objects and actions. Just like an object-oriented program, all objects have state, which is their nouns, and their behavior, which are their verbs. So in design, we have these 2 metaphors as well. We have objects, like files and folders, and what else? Pages and links. And we have actions or behaviors, such as save, delete. So what are we doing with those things? Like, what am I saving? A file, right? All right, so we have a set of objects, and then we have a set of actions that we perform on those objects. And so when you're creating a menu, that's essentially all you're doing, is telling users, these are your objects, and these are the actions you can do to them. So it makes it really easy to use parallel structure, right? So for instance, when you click on file, what is that? Is that an object or an action? It's an object. And so when you open up the file menu, what are your options? Edit, save, exit. So what are those? Actions that you can perform on the object. So anytime you're creating a menu structure, think about what your objects are and your actions. So you wouldn't want to say file, edited, saved, saving. You'd want to use like a nice parallel structure in present tense to say, okay, these are the things you can do, right? Okay. So also you want to use familiar and consistent terminology. Like for instance, we're used to a file menu. A lot of the browsers these days have more of the pop-up menus, and like I have a hard time figuring out how to save my bookmarks anymore. We also want to ensure that items are distinct from one another. What happens when you have a menu where there's two options that are too similar? You don't know which one to pick, and you make errors, right? You have to back out. Like, okay, that's not what I wanted. Use consistent and concise phrasing. That's the parallel structure. And then it also says bring the keyword to the left. So we read from left to right. And so if for some reason you have to make an option that's longer than just a word, like edit, you want the main word to be to the left. Because what do we do as users?
Read the first word.
We just read the first part, and we don't read the entire thing, right? That's what we do. Okay. More design guidelines. Since we love all these design guidelines. Categorical grouping of menu items. You want to create groups that are logically similar. Form groups that cover all possibilities. Don't you hate when you, for instance, take a survey and it doesn't list your answer as one of the options? Okay. Make sure that items are non-overlapping. So like for instance on a survey when it has, what is your age range? Like 16 to 18, 18 to 20. What's the problem with that?
Overlap.
So if you're 18, you have two right answers, right? Okay. Use familiar terminology but ensure that items are distinct from one another. Repeat yourself often. No, this is what was on the last slide. Item presentation sequence. Think about how your options are presented. So for instance, on a file menu, what usually comes first?
In alphabet?
Like on your, is it alphabetical order for the options?
Oh no, usually the items that you use the most first.
So there are different ways that you can do it. You can do it where the items that you use the most should come first. Or if there's some kind of hierarchical like structure such as chronological structure, that might come first. Like you might want to save a file more frequently or first before you delete a file, right? So think about what makes the most sense for your app. Okay? And then other approaches, like obviously group-related items whenever possible. Alphabetic sequence of terms. So if there is no intrinsic structure to your items, at least do something like do it alphabetical. Okay. So when you're giving me a menu, like give me some rationale as to okay, well why is it in this order? Is it because you put the most frequent items first? Did you decide to just put it alphabetically? What did you do? Most frequently items used first, or most important items first. The problem with the most frequent items first is what? Wouldn't that have to be dynamic? Because over time, the way you use things changes, right? So the problem is people don't like the adaptive or adaptable menus where they change, right? You kind of expect things to be the same when you go to try to select something. So that's one of the problems of if you do something like the most frequent. That's going to change because your frequency changes over time. Okay. More design guidelines. Obviously, ensure consistency between titles, the task action phrases, item placement, instructions, error messages, status reports, anything you can think of. Make sure you're consistent across at least your entire application. If not your own application, then the set of applications that are similar to yours. Okay? Layout and visual design, how you indent, upper, lowercase, the symbols that you use. One of the things that I have to do on web courses all the time is like, okay, I'm using colons, I'm not using dashes, and I have to try to make that as consistent as possible. And then other approaches for being able to input information are keyboard shortcuts or user for configured key toolbars to be able to change the options that you present the user so they can change them themselves. Okay, there's also form fill-in. This is used when text-based input is required. They can't just do a point and click. And we see forms all the time, right? Okay. Same things, just like a menu. Descriptive title, logical sequence, appropriate text entry fields. These are all things that you have to think about when you're designing forms. So title is important for, okay, what's the information that I'm filling out? We want to have comprehensible instructions, like what's the purpose of this? Because how we fill something out for one purpose is going to be drastically different than how we would fill it out for another, okay? Sometimes I'm white, sometimes I'm half Chinese, and I'm half white. It depends on the context of where I'm submitting, okay? Logical groupings and sequence of fields, visually appealing layout of the form. We don't like having to go all over the place, we want it to flow, okay? These are some more design guidelines, and a lot of these already overlap with the 8 golden rules you've already learned, and also the design of everyday things, so I'm not going to go over each and every one. And then there's also form-specific fields that are used in a way to help users do less error input, right? Because one of the big problems in giving people open access to put stuff in your database is that users are notorious for creating bad data. Okay? So for telephone numbers, social security numbers, times, dates, we can use input masks to say phone numbers for this website have to be in numeric format. Or give them where you can only use the parentheses or the dashes. But let your user know what your format is. Okay? We have validation checks for all of these things, right? And then you can also use direct manipulation interfaces. Remember how I told you we go from one spectrum of input where you have a blank text box for a user to enter in a date versus the calendar picker? So which one's the direct manipulation? The calendar picker. And which one do you prefer? We tend to prefer the calendar picker because we don't want to figure out how the particular website wants us to input a date. Okay. There's also dialog boxes. These are appropriate when the user task is interrupted for some reason to request additional information. So this is like often when there's like an error condition that needs to be dealt with, or when you're doing something that requires more input before you proceed, like printing, right? Because a dialog box pops up and says, okay, how many copies do you want to print? Don't you hate sometimes when you hit the print icon and it forgets to bring up the dialog box first, and you wanted to change that you wanted a duplex or in black and white, or you only wanted to print 3 pages of a 100-page document, and you run over your printer really quick and hit cancel? Okay. So that's the benefit of dialog boxes. Okay. Some of these are modal, which force a decision because they don't go away or let you do anything else in the application until you give your input. But some of them are non-modal, like when you do Control-F to find something on Word, you can go back and forth in your Word document to edit that text instead of having to close out of the dialog, edit the text, and then start again. So it depends on how required that information is to proceed. Okay. More design guidelines. With dialog boxes, you have to think of 2 things. The first are all of the internal things that are in this dialog box. You want them laid out in a neat, clean way. You want to use nice alignment and titles and provide intuitive form input and all of this other stuff. However, you also have to think about the external relationships. What do you think I mean by that? When a dialog dialog box pops up, it covers the real estate that's on your screen, right? And so sometimes when it does that, it actually interrupts your task to where you have to move it out of the way to be able to complete your task or do something. So you want to make sure that it has things like smooth appearance and disappearance, that users actually realize that if a dialog box popped up, that it doesn't get in their way of what their task is. And also make it easy to disappear, okay? The worst possible thing that you can do is get onto a web page that has a while loop JavaScript pop-up box, right? And you just push okay, and it just keeps popping back up. That's the worst thing we do in my web design classes, that while loop is a pop-up box. You have to basically close out of the whole thing. Okay, anyway, don't do that to me. All right. So these are sections in your textbook you can skip. One of the last things in this chapter talks about audio menus. Why do you think these would be good in some cases? Wendy?
Or you can't use your hands to select something.
Right. There's a lot of times when you can't use your hands, especially because we all want to be productive while we drive now, right? Is texting illegal in Florida during driving?
I think so.
I don't know if it is.
It's like
illegal.
I think I've seen
So
it on the
it's a secondary
highway
violation.
board, but I think it says that
I should
maybe
keep note of that. Okay.
there was another
So
mistake.
there are times when it's good to have an audio menu for mobile prompts. So this takes into effect, remember how we talked about natural language last time? Also, I gave you some links here because one of the things that I saw most frequently as a criticism to last semester's prototypes is that there was way overuse of text-based buttons as menu items and then just form fill-in. How many times would you want to download an app that's just a whole bunch of text-based menus and form fill-in? That's usually not what you want from a mobile app, right? You want like a nice set of icons to be able to click on like a dashboard of options. You want to have some nice visual output, maybe some pictures. So please, whatever you do, avoid mobile app designs that are only text-based menus and form fill-in because they're not going to be pretty or fun or that appealing to your end users. Okay, so action items. Peer reviews due this Thursday. Your optional revision is now due the 17th. Your initial mobile app prototype, so start mocking up these screens and figuring out your workflow for your primary task. Due on the 24th. Next time, you're going to have that prototype of your video demo. Alright,
How
have
long
a
have you had
great
this on for? Yes.
afternoon, evening.
A year and